listening to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast. My name is Farhan, also known as Gunner since '96. And as always, joining me here this afternoon is Adam Keys. Adam, are you ready?
I'm ready, Farhan.
Okay, well, unfortunately, I have to say that there won't be any quick fire questions this episode. I'm grossly underprepared, but that's okay because we do have a very sneaky surprise for the listeners. If you haven't realized from the title, we do have ourselves a very special guest. It gives me great pleasure to say that we've got Dexter Hercules in the building, who happens to be one of the world's most respected drummers. Not only just that, Dexter's toured around with individuals like Ronnie Wood, Emeli Sande, Stormzy, Olly Murs, Rita Ora, Little Mix, and the list goes on and on. And so yeah, it's not only that, he happens also to be an Arsenal fan, most importantly. So Dexter,
that's the most important thing.
Thanks for taking the time out to join us. How are you doing?
I am fine, thank you very much. As you can see, I'm in a dark room. I don't know if the viewers can see this. I've got my drums in the background. It's really dark in here, but I'm in my studio. And I just like to have like dark settings when I'm in here. It helps me concentrate. And apologies if you can hear any drumming in the back. There's a studio next door to me and there's a guy drumming away. So apologies if you can hear that. But I'm really happy to be here. Thank you guys for having me. I can't wait to talk all things Arsenal with you guys. So
yeah, well,
let's
look,
get it.
You join us in a bit of a weird time with Arsenal not obviously playing at the moment because of the interlull. I've just finished watching the Arsenal women play, which is a first for me because I never do, and so that was quite an entertaining game for me because obviously we scored 2 late goals against Aston Villa. But honestly, I found the last week to be quite nice to just step back and be able to take a break from football. What are you guys like? Adam, I'll start with you. What are you like during the interlull period? Are you kind of itching for it to return back? Are you a football fanatic? Do you have to watch football no matter what team it is? What's it like?
Yeah, I can't wait for it to come back. I think the big thing for me is international football. I look out for Arsenal players. Northern Ireland won, which was nice to see. We we don't have much of a team at the minute, but it's a case of I don't really watch international football. I watch England whenever Saka's playing, Rice, so on, and I kind of watch Arsenal players during the break. And I know Odegaard's going to play for Norway tonight, but aside from that, it's more keeping an eye on what Arsenal players have done, and I don't really care that much outside it. So I obviously want to see both Northern and the Republic do well. But at the same time, it's a case of I tend to just like keep an eye on Arsenal players, don't really watch any games, and pine after the return of Arsenal rather than actually caring enough to turn on the telly and sit down and watch a game that I'm not interested in. So it's the same on a weekend. If Arsenal are playing on like a Monday night, I find it really hard during the weekend because it's like I'm just waiting for Monday. So yeah, for me, I can't wait for the Prem to return next weekend. And it feels like this one's come around so quickly because it's only 4 weeks ago we had the last one, and it's another 4 weeks and we've got another one. So it's just too many of them.
Yeah, Dexter, I never really understood the whole concept of having, international friendlies and qualifiers so close to each other. It only feels like, just as Adam said, it feels like the other day we were on an international break. Another one's come around. I'm the type of individual to kind of step away from football, not really care about international friendlies or qualifiers, unless it's the big competitions like the Euros or the World Cup. How have you found the last week?
To be honest, really frustrating. I'm quite similar to Adam. Like when it is international break, I'm really focused on what the Arsenal players are doing, and it's more from the perspective of hoping that nobody gets injured. Like that's the most important thing for me. Like I know Partey is being closely monitored, and I'm just really worried about how our players are going to come back to Arsenal. That's the most important thing for me. Obviously, I think at the start of every season when we have these like international breaks and they're so close together, it really breaks up that stride that we're getting into. And I think it's even worse when we're off the back of a win. you know, because like you just want to go straight into the next game. The last international break, we just beat United, and you kind of just want to go straight into the next game after that. And then likewise with this one, we've just beaten City, which is one of the biggest wins that we will have this season. And you kind of just want to go straight into that Chelsea game off the back of that win, but it's broken up by the international break. So for me, it's mainly just hoping that nobody comes back injured. We can come straight back into our stride and on to the next game. So it is a little bit frustrating, but you know, it's nice to see our players kind of getting out there on the international stage as well and proving to everybody how good they are. But for me, that's mainly from the perspective of the qualifiers rather than the friendlies. The friendlies, I'd rather not see anybody play just so, you know, there's no injuries. But I know the qualifiers are still a big deal.
Yeah, well, look, we don't have to wait too long until we see the Arsenal back in action against Chelsea. It's going to be a big, big game. They seem to have picked up a bit of form in the last few games. But yeah, we'll have a look at the Chelsea game and the upcoming fixtures, as well as sort of casting our minds back to what's happened during the period after the United game, how we're feeling, and yeah, just I guess assessing what's been happening. So Adam, I'll start off with you. How are you feeling? Just, you know, your general feelings about the team, about where we are, where we're headed, and evaluating those games after the United win. So if we just quickly, you know, look back to those fixtures, we had Everton away, which, you know, historically has been really difficult for us. We ended up winning 1-0, battered PSV in our Champions League opener, drew against Spurs 2-2 at home. We then beat Brentford away in the Carabao Cup 1-0. Steamrolled Bournemouth 4-0 away, ended up losing to Lens, but then beat City 1-0. So yeah, tell me how you're feeling about those games and, you know, where we are as a club right now.
Yeah, I think the last month's been very good. If we're going to be honest, I think Spurs one's disappointing because one, it's Spurs, and two, it's the nature of the mistake and the way it came about. But all in all, I think it's not just looking at our results that's important in the last month. It's looking at the table in general. So City had 6 wins in 6, and everyone was saying they're going to steamroll the league. And then Dex and I got together, watched the game together, and we won and City lose. So the moral of that is we should do it more often. But I think it's one of those for me. Look, we have had a lot of injuries to contend with already. If you look, Zinchenko missed nearly all of pre-season, and then Arteta benched Big Gabby. So that was completely tweaking and changing the system after a full pre-season. I'm not doing that. Then with Timber's injury to contend with, he was one of the top players in pre-season, so that took more adaptation. Then Partey gets injured, so he's missed the last month. We've had Martinelli missed every game since the Everton game, and he started that goal by scoring. Although it was ruled out, he was really on it that day. He looked like he was really starting to click. Then we've Saka's injury. Jesus has just come back, and I think with everything that we've had to contend with this season, it is an incredible run that we've put together. And also without, I guess, fully playing the really exciting football. But what we've built is a really strong spine, a really disciplined core, and an off the ball game that we've always wanted at Arsenal. Like, how many times over the years have we said the minute we lose it, we're cut open far too easily? Why do other teams not have these problems? Why is it only Arsenal concede these stupid goals? And they're the things that we're seeing being cut out. And I know, Tottenham aside, that's a one-off individual error from Jorginho, who responded really well to it. But look, the last month for me has been great. I think we've really grown as a team. And the other thing to remember is Saka, Jesus, and Martinelli haven't actually started a game together. And Jesus hasn't started up front in the Premier League. So we saw him up front against PSV, and he was scary. He was insane that day. He was just all over the place. He was the one really like making things happen, causing the chaos we know he can. And for me, that's the reason that I'm really optimistic about this next period, because we've gone from having this big injury crisis, even Declan Rice carrying a knock, to now we're coming back and everyone looks like they're going to be fit. Martinelli's had 2 weeks off, so he's going to have his feet up. Any kind of, I guess, concerns about him will be worked on. You'd like to hope Saka will be okay. And Rice was actually given a rare breather for England too. So I think we're actually entering into a good position after a really chaotic run of constant changes. Like, we haven't played the same team at all this season. Every game we've put out a different team. And when you look at the results, it's a real testament to the team that we're putting together and both the quality of the individuals. And the other big thing that has always frustrated me with Arsenal is that we make a couple of changes and everything changes. Whereas we've been able to put out different sides and maintain the same intensity, discipline, and playing style. And that's ultimately going to serve us well coming into this next pretty intense period.
So unlike Adam, I take a little bit of a different stance on this because we had such, I guess, I'll put this in quotations or, you know, I'd say it lightly. Arsenal had somewhat of a successful season last season. You know, we for the most part, we were very, very good. Our football was probably the best in the league. We were unfortunate not to get those last 10 games or not to replicate those performances that we did at the beginning, the early stages. But if we're comparing the two, which I've been doing quite a lot lately, I feel like we haven't been as dominant as maybe we could be. I feel like if you look at the games in isolation, putting away the historical context, we we maybe could do a lot more. You know, Everton, tough place to go away, but the Arsenal side today, in 2023, I think has far more quality than a team like Everton. We look at the Spurs game. Could we have killed them off? Maybe. The only game I feel like we've seen the full force of our, attacking prowess and just the general quality of the football was against Bournemouth. And obviously, the City game was, you would have to look at that game in isolation because it was essentially two sides that cancelled each other out. But Dexter, do you feel like, opposed to last season, we're slowly easing our way into the season rather than just hitting the ground running from the first couple of games like we did, last season?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've definitely seemed to be taking a bit more of a pragmatic approach. Um, it's a hard one for me because obviously last season we came flying out the blocks. Nobody expected it. It was like this spectacular football. It was fast paced. There was movement everywhere. You know, we had the new surprise, welcome surprise of Jesus in our team with Zinchenko in Saliba had just come back. We had this. It was all new to us. So it was really nice to see, quite similar to what those guys down the road are doing at the moment. The way Tottenham are playing now reminds me of how we were playing last season. But if you remember, more or less up until about January, everybody was saying that City were like this last season, everybody was saying that they wasn't quite the same. Like it seemed like they had the slow start. And then obviously after a while, after the World Cup, they picked up. So for me, the way that I'm actually looking at it this season is to be a little bit more relaxed and pick it up when we need to pick it up in the business end of the season. And I do think, obviously, there was loads of mistakes made at the end of the season, but you do have to sit and wonder if some of it was just burnout as well, because we had been playing so intense from the very start of the season, where it's been, even though we haven't played amazing, for me, it's all about just staying in and around where we are at the moment until it's time to actually put on the burners, when we actually have our full strength squad and we've got, everybody fit and available. That's when I would like to see us at the business end of the season, really turning it on. Our team at the moment really does remind me of, do you know, like when when Liverpool won the league, the season before it was like this squashbuckling football, and then the season they actually won the league, it was a little bit more of a measured, calmer approach. And it just seems like Arsenal have matured so much now that we're not going into games like having to blitz teams and steamroll teams. We know that we've got the quality. It's a bit more patient in the build up, and we know that there's more of a confidence that we're going to win these games, and I can definitely see that. But yeah, we're not going into the games and steamrolling teams, and sometimes it can be a little bit frustrating. But if you analyze it as a whole, I think as long as we're in and around it come, April, March, April, then we can really see Arsenal turning it on. And if you remember the way that City did it last season, man, after the World Cup, it was just like something else happened. They clicked right into gear at the right time. And the most important thing is staying in and around it, making sure that you're beating teams who you need to beat, and making sure that you're right up there. So when it does come to that business end of the season, that we can turn it on properly. So for me, it's not necessarily about the performances right now. Yes, I'd love to see more performances like, how we played against PSV, but teams in the Premier League have figured us out as well. And we need to be wary of that. So I do think we, as fans, could probably afford to be a little bit more patient and just respect the fact that we're in second place at the moment. We're right up there. We're still, favourites to challenge for City, challenge for the league. And, I'm happy with where we are at the moment. Would I like to see a couple more goals? Yeah, but, I'm slow and steady wins the race for me.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to the way that we've approached the start of this season. Because as you rightly said, last season it was a surprise to all the clubs that we were playing. I mean, if you think back to how clubs were, viewing us and the approach that they were taking, we were very much seen as the soft, same old Arsenal who will easily get bullied. We then came out of the blocks with this really attractive attacking brand of football, playing out of the back, passing it in and around the teams, high pressing, high tempo. And I guess the difference we're seeing this season is Arteta is trying desperately hard to find as many alternative routes to breaking teams down. And it brings me now to the manager, because I think we don't often have a chat about the manager, because he's been, rightly so. I think we have to give him praise for the work that he's done. He's managed to change this Arsenal side into a title contending team. But this season, anyway, there has been some controversy around decisions that he's made, around tactical decisions, as well as team selection choices. Adam, how have you made so far, Arteta as a manager, but also as a tactician? Give me your assessment so far.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's worked. And if you look at the table, his experiments, I guess you could call them, he's got away with some of them. So some of them have worked, some of them he's got away with, and some of them haven't gone to plan. I think the Fulham game, for example, the experiments didn't work in that game. The first goal is a result of a complete breakdown of communication with Partey. Saka lays it back, expecting Ben White to be there, as he usually is. And that kind of thing is an example of an experiment that didn't come off. I still think with Big Gabby on the pitch, we deal with corners better than we do without him on the pitch. And again, we concede him from a corner in that game. So I think for the most part, he's got away with some. Some of them have worked very well. And then, look, he's also had to contend with injuries. There are some things that I would have liked to have seen more of, which is rotation. I've talked to both of you guys a lot about Saka. We've all been very concerned about Saka for me, I believe Saka can play the volume of minutes. I don't see that being an issue. What I see being an issue is when he's had two heavy knocks in 2 games. He's had to come off in both games, and especially the Spurs game. He was a real doubt going into Bournemouth. Then he gets another big knock in that game, gets forced off again, and then he's rushed back for Lens away. And it is one of those, like, this isn't disrespecting not Lons, it's not disrespecting the Champions League. We all know Saka would have wanted to play that game, but part of being a manager is telling your best player, look, we need you on Sunday. We've got the biggest game of the season. We need you fit for that. And also placing that faith in other players within the squad. So I think it's not risking players whenever they've got a knock, especially the likes of Saka. And I think him being out for City, now that we've won it, is possibly the best thing that could have happened, because it shows Arteta that we can win without Saka in the team, because it's just been so long that he's played every game, every minute of every game for so long, that I think he has to accept that Saka isn't just this kind of unbreakable player that can play every minute. Because my concern about Saka isn't the volume of minutes, it's the playing through knocks and so on, which every player does. But come the end of the season, we want Saka firing in the same way Dexter said about the whole team firing at the end of the season. We saw it last year. He was giving us a 7 out of 10 every week at the end of the season. He was doing all the things on the ball, all the things that Jack Grealish gets praised for every week. But the reality is Saka's on another level to Grealish. He does everything Grealish does, but he gives you goals and assists as well. And those goals and assists started to dry up in the last 10 games. So it wasn't that his performances were bad. It was just that he's our match winner. He's our real decisive player. And I want him firing at that time. So with my criticism of Arteta, it would be around Saka as opposed to kind of the team as a whole, because I think he's adapted well. I really like the fact he brought Jorginho in against City. He went with that double pivot. He went with the solidity that we needed in the game, where in previous years, Arteta would have thought, you know what, I'm going to go toe-to-toe with City. I'm going to go 100 mile an hour, try to stamp our authority on the game, kind of in the way he did against Spurs when it was the top four. We didn't need to win that game. We needed a draw. Would have put us through. Arteta was like, nah, we're going to go out and show them that we're the team. We need to be taken serious. We got battered that day. Then we got battered twice against City last year, even though at home we had far more possession than them. We had some really good chances. So I think Arteta's matured, and even down to the use of Zinchenko. If you look at Zinchenko, in most games, he's in centre mid. He's popping up everywhere. He could be at right back at times. His heat map against City, he's a traditional left back for 90% of that game. Pops up the odd time in midfield, but he's stuck to his position like a left back. And they're all areas where Arteta's learning and growing. And he is a young coach, and he's got a lot right during the last 2-3 years and really rebuilt this club, because we were an absolute mess a few years ago, making Gunnersaurus redundant, having Ozil pay his wages, all that circus that was going on around the club. Arteta's stamped all that out, and he's got us playing great football and challenging again. So I think for the most part, I've really liked what I've seen this season. I think we're growing, we're maturing, but I think it's not just as a result of what Arteta's doing. I think the players are growing and maturing. They're that year older, that bit more experienced. They're more together as a team. And ultimately, if you're a coach and all those things are starting to click for you, you can give players more instructions. And even Pep has said that about being together 6 or 7 years as a team, and it becomes easier to coach. So yeah, all in all, I'd probably give him an 8 out of 10, but just a lesson on don't drop Gabby again. And when Saka's carrying a knock, give him a breather.
So next, as you heard from Adam at the beginning, he reminded us of a number of different, I guess, questionable decisions made by Arteta at the from the beginning of the season up until now. So things like playing Partey at right back, lack of game time for players like Emil Smith-Rowe, overplaying Saka, the whole Raya versus Ramsdale thing that's happening, playing Nketiah up front. Havertz, where does he play? Where's his best position? And my biggest concern was the lack of rotation, which essentially led to a number of players being injured. Now, I don't, you can make the argument whether it was a case that Arteta, because of the lack of rotation, it led to injury or not. But essentially, we've seen more or less, our top tier players playing game in, game out. whether it be Champions League game and then Premier League game. The turnaround time for recovery has been very small. 3 days we're talking about, right? So this season is unique in Arteta's case because it's a season where he knows he's challenging for a title, but also he's back in the Champions League. So he's in no man's land, right now. He's sort of learning on the job, as you might want to put it. So where do you stand with Arteta's start to the season so far?
I mean, Adam covered quite a lot there. Sometimes, you wonder, is he a genius or is he being really naive at times? And like he kind of he's slap bang in the middle for me sometimes. I think there's moments where, tactically you can tell that he's a genius. Case in point, the last game he brings on Tomiyasu, he tells him to go up front. We end up scoring a goal from it, which is exactly like he has these moments where you're just like, this guy's incredible. Even when you hear what Declan Rice has had to say about him since joining the club. Rice has only been there a few months, and certain things that he said about Arteta, you've heard him say that he gives us all the tools necessary, and it's for us to then implement the game plan. And if things go wrong, I've heard Rice say that it's kind of more on us than Arteta actually giving us the game plan. So he has these moments where you're just like, this guy's incredible. The way that he has coached certain players. I think he doesn't get enough credit for how good Saka is right now, and how good Martinelli is, and how good Odegaard has become. Arteta does not get enough. Like, we kind of praise these players for being great players, forgetting that before Arteta, has kind of come in and really coached them to this level where we're saying that these are world-class players, people are not giving him enough credit. But he does have these moments. Me and Adam was sitting and watching the game, and I was saying for ages, take Saka off, take him off, take him off. And he has these moments where you're just like, oh my gosh, like I can see it. Everybody in the stadium can see it. All of us at home can see it. How are you not seeing it? What's going on here? Or he has these moments where he confuses us with not playing Gabriel for the first few games of the season, and all of us are sitting at home scratching our head thinking, what is he doing here? And so sometimes it's really hard to tell, what he's trying to do. I do think he is an incredible coach. I do think he's a revolutionary coach, but I think sometimes he can be guilty of maybe overcomplicating things. We've seen with the overuse of players before. I remember 2 seasons ago, the Spurs game when Partey got injured.
Yeah.
And he should have came off ages ago. I don't even know if he should have played that game. And I'm not sure if he's necessarily learnt from his mistakes in that regard, because we're seeing it now with Saka. We're seeing players maybe break down when they don't need to be played. They don't need to be overused. I'm an advocate for starting with, your strongest team, but especially in games where, okay, like the game's won, does Saka need to stay on for the 90? Does he need to? Can he come off a little bit earlier? These are things where we're trying to... I think Arsenal fans, we have been scarred by injuries over the years. So especially when we've got like great players, we've seen our Wilsheres and our Diabys, these Eduardos, we've seen freak injuries happen to these players, and they're not the same again. So I think a lot of the concern comes from, what we've seen. So when we've got players as good as Partey, and Saka getting overused, for us, it's like we go into that panic mode where we're just like, get him off. We need him. We need him. We can't afford for players like Saka to be getting injured, because we know potentially if, at the moment, he hasn't even really got a proper backup, So I do think that Arteta, once a game is done, he needs to make those changes a lot quicker. From a tactical perspective as well, I do kind of wonder with, you mentioned the Raya thing. That's really been something that's been quite hard for a lot of fans to deal with. That's been really hard for me to deal with, to be honest with you, because I don't think that Ramsdale put a foot wrong.
Yeah.
And I know that it's like, the goalkeeping position is completely different to the outfield position. And I've really been battling with what's the end goal here. We've heard him mention that he's thought of subbing keepers in a game, which, to be honest with you, I don't agree with. And I wonder I feel like Ramsdale is such a big personality in our dressing room that I wonder what that is doing to the dressing room as well as the player. So if there's little things like that that kind of concern me, just things kind of going on behind the scenes, that maybe could he handle these situations different? Obviously we saw even Balogun come out earlier this week and saying, how the circumstances of how he left, that maybe it was out of his control. I've been wondering the same thing with Smith Rowe. I think Smith Rowe can get a lot more chances. Some of these things, it's not my place to worry about them, but you do think, what is it doing to the dressing room as well as the players? Especially when these players are like crowd favorites, but it's football, it's a ruthless sport, and Arteta has proven to be a very ruthless manager. So I'd like to think that he knows what he's doing when he's making these really, really big decisions. But I don't agree with all of the decisions that he makes.
Yeah,
Just on that,
something quite important though. When you, yeah, sorry, go on.
Sorry, I was going to ask just on
Yeah.
Dexter's point about Arteta talking about subbing keepers. We haven't actually discussed this properly. Do either of you believe that he will ever sub a keeper, or do you think that was Arteta just bravado in an interview? Because we know he can give it that as well. So, what does your gut say? Will he ever do it?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, no, he's played the game long enough to know that you don't do that. But I think it was just something that he chose to say. And even look, if I was a keeper and if I was Ramsdale and I heard him say that would make it even worse for me,
Yeah.
because I'd be thinking, what, you want to sub me off? I'm a keeper. You don't sub me off. So, like I said, I wonder what stuff like that is doing for not only Ramsdale's, frame of mind, but also for the dressing room. Is it a little bit confusing when he comes out and says that? If I was a defender or if I was in the team, I'd be thinking, why has he said that? I'd like the stability if I was a defender, knowing who my keeper is. I'd want to build up that relationship with whoever my keeper is, knowing that he's going to get a run of games, not knowing that he could get subbed in the 75th minute. So
Yeah.
I don't agree with what he said at all.
What do you
I mean,
think?
I personally, I'd love to see it. I would love to see it because it's Arteta, and if anyone's going to get away with it, it's him. So, and I think
don't
he
know if he
views himself
would.
a bit of an artist in that sense. Well, look, here's someone. This is his first job, as a manager. He's won the FA Cup. He's contending for the title. He's had that history with Pep Guardiola. The story's written, right? Here's as a baby surviving what he survived with his heart issues, and then Barcelona, going to Rangers, coming to Everton. He is a visionary. I think we can all agree on that. He sees the game differently to what most managers would see. He's already changed the landscape when we look at things like playing out of the back, when we look at things like, the pressing nature of the game. Every game we're picking up something new. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if we were to see it one game. And I'm all here for it. I want to see the beauty of the game and the way that it changes and develops over the years. Someone's going to have to do something drastic at some point. So let him be the man to do that, And as you just said, rightly said, when you were speaking about the dressing room, I think you made quite a poignant point where you highlighted the importance of the chemistry and what it does in the dressing room. Because, and I say this to a lot of my United friends who, glazer out. Well, if your manager had a backbone and came in and changed the culture of the club, you wouldn't need to be looking at the Glazers. And we don't need to be looking at Stan Kroenke, because the first thing that Arteta did when he came in was to address the culture and address the non-negotiables. We remember those clearly. And so That's what makes me feel really nervous when I look at the over tinkering, maybe, or the lack of game time of certain players, or this Raya Ramsdale sort of conundrum. It's what does it do for at Coney? What does it do for other players? The mindset. What does it do for the focus? Ramsdale's been so integral as a character, and I think we underplay the importance of characters. You know, when I look at someone like Havertz on the pitch, someone who lacks the characteristics in comparison to someone like Declan Rice, and I know they're completely two different profile players, but you see the body language on the pitch, you see the way they carry themselves. It's so important to be, especially today, 2023, when you're trying to knock City off their pedestal. 100 minutes you have to be going 100 miles an hour for 100 minutes, and unless you have characters like that, it's so easy to just drop the bar just a little bit. And I guess it brings me to the point of talking about managing the workload during such a busy season, especially during busy periods. So just looking forward to the games that we've got coming up, especially with the Champions League as well. Again, we only have 3-4 days of recovery time between each game. So we've got Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, then an away trip to Sevilla. Play Chelsea next Saturday. Then on the Tuesday we've got Sevilla, followed by a game against Sheffield United at home on the Saturday. And then, 3 days later or 4 days later, we're away to West Ham in the Carabao Cup.
Yeah.
3 days later, we're away to Newcastle. So, Adam, tell me how you would approach this situation, because if we cast our minds back to about a month ago, I was highlighting and stressing and emphasizing the importance of rotating and doing it well to make sure that we, number one, avoid injuries, and number two, give players enough game time in order to keep that balance of, satisfaction, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, I think that we've all kind of touched on it is obviously rotation of key players so that they fit at the end of the season. But one of the other things that I think is overlooked with Pep is how sharp he keeps every player. So City have got the smallest big squad in the league. They've got a squad of like 19 players. So it's not a massive squad, but every player is top quality. And that's the difference between City and other teams. Other teams might have a bigger squad, but a lot less talent overall. And Pep's great at bringing players in, keeping them sharp, keeping them fighting for their place, and making them believe that everyone has an opportunity to play. Probably the only one in the squad right now that's completely ostracized is Calvin Phillips. And that's because he's just nowhere near the standard of the rest of the team. But I think that's something that Arteta needs to do. Is Dexter's mentioned Smith Rowe. We've touched on Fabio Vieira as well. Vieira's had some minutes this season. Even Reece Nelson. Nelson's only played about, I think it's 37 minutes in the league he's played. Smith Rowe's only played something like 12 or 13 league minutes. So getting those players more involved. And because we've seen it with Tomiyasu, he's got on at the end of games. He's been able to play his way back into form. He's been able to start games. And I think giving those players minutes. So, look, all being well, Saka and Martinelli are going to be completely fit after the international break, because that would be 2.5 weeks off for Saka. Essentially, 2 full weeks for Martinelli, and he's only played 45 minutes. So I'd like to hope Chelsea away, we start with those two and Jesus up front. And the reality is they would probably be fit and raring to go again for the Tuesday night in Sevilla, and probably play again against Sheffield United. But the difference is the Sheffield United game at home, you would like to think we're 4-0 up after 60 minutes like we were against Bournemouth. That's the time that Arteta starts getting players off. Chelsea as well are a team that, they've won their last 2 games. I watched the Fulham game and they are a terrible side. And Chelsea had problems against them at times. So they battered Burnley in their last game. Burnley are a side that play some really nice football at times.
They've been terrible.
They play nice football, but they've got no attacking threat and no defensive structure. It's just nice football. And I would say most teams are going to batter Burnley this season. And it's kind of naivety on companies' parties trying to play really nice football with a squad not capable of doing it. But I think in terms of rotation, the front 3 can manage a lot of minutes, but it's getting them off at the end of games. As we've all said many a time before, it's when a game's closed out, 70 minutes. That's when you get your Sakas off, your Jesus, Martinelli, those kind of players. Even Odegaard, we've just accepted that Odegaard can play 90 minutes twice a week with ease. And that's because he keeps running right to the end. He never looks tired. But he's another one. Get him off. Give Fabio Vieira a chance to play in that position, because that's where his natural position is. Let's see how he looks there. Can he push Odegaard more? Can he be the player that comes on, lifts the tempo slightly for the last 20 minutes and maybe gives some fringe players a chance to go and get a goal, and keep those players hungry and keep the opposition on their toes as well? Because I do think sometimes the likes of Saka is very good at managing a game, managing his own workload during the game and kind of seeing it out.
Yeah.
Sometimes you bring on fresh blood and take those players off that are just seeing it out and using their experience and so on. And it really causes the opposition more problems. And there's opportunities to score more goals. So for me, I just hope that we just get slightly better at rotating those attacking players, because as I've said with Tomiyasu, we're doing that. He's getting minutes on the left, on the right, even at centre back in the cups. So, and we've got Partey coming back, but I think we've got enough players that are rotating and are getting minutes. It's just that front three that I want to see Arteta, particularly with Saka, getting them off. And as well, I would like to see Vieira in that right 8 position and giving Odegaard a breather for the last 20 minutes, provided the game's won, and seeing what Vieira can really do, because there is a player in there. I just think he's someone that needs a real run of games, because he had a really good start. Then he got taken off at halftime against Spurs, and we haven't seen a lot of him since. And he's another one that picked up a bit of an injury too. So yeah, get these players playing, get them fit, and get them pushing their teammates. And that's really how you're going to rotate, because everyone's fighting to play.
Dexter, how are you approaching this situation then? Arsenal come back, play Chelsea, then 4 days later they have to redeem themselves in the Champions League against Sevilla, back home at Sheffield United. I mean, if we look at the Premier League games, I don't want to disrespect any other clubs or put us on that pedestal, but the only real difficult task I can see is probably Newcastle away. Sheffield United at home seems pretty simple. Chelsea away seems simple. Burnley at home, fairly straightforward. And then after Burnley, we're back on another international break. But then you've got those games in between, which complicate matters a little bit. So if you're Arteta and if you get to distribute the game time, how are you approaching this situation?
Right. So for me, this is it's quite a difficult one. I don't think anybody in the Arsenal team is any stranger to midweek games. We've been doing it, whether it's been in the Europa League or not. Like, it's not like we haven't had midweek games. The difference is that when you're in the Champions League, those midweek games where we was, playing Europa and resting our best players, we can't do that in the Champions League. And we had a great example of that losing the other day in the Champions League to a team that we probably should have beaten. But you have to take even the games that seem smaller, especially in the Champions League in our group anyway, you have to take them as serious as you would playing Man City away. And that's the difference. It's the intensity of the games. I think also we have come such a long way as a team from where we were when Arteta took over, especially with last season being so great, that the expectation on this season to win a trophy is higher than it's ever been, which for me then makes those Carabao Cup games important as well, because we need to leave this season with something. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I also don't think that we can go into those games taking them lightly as well. Whereas maybe before we might have just said, don't care about the Carabao Cup, don't care about the FA Cup, we just want to get top 4, or we just want to win the Europa League. Now, all of a sudden, it feels like we've got a team and we've got a squad that can challenge for every competition that we're in. And I actually believe that we've got a team that's strong enough to go down to the last few days of the Premier League. I think that we've got a team that's strong enough to compete into the very latter stages of the Champions League. depending on the draw. But I still think that we can compete no matter who we play against. We've got a team that, you know, can win the FA Cup. That was Arteta's first trophy. That's an important trophy to the fans. And we haven't won the Carabao Cup in how long? So I do think that all of these competitions are really important. So I think it's a little bit of a hard one actually for Arteta to just rotate and just maybe, you know, take certain competitions lightly. I think he has to go quite strong in most of the games. The issue that we have is obviously certain players and, you know, getting game time. We need to see the likes of Smith Rowe. We need to see the likes of Vieira. We need to see the likes of Nelson and all of these players getting minutes, because there is going to come points in the season where other players are going to go down and we're going to need these players to be up to scratch. So it's a little bit difficult, but you know, for me, as long as they're the will in training and the will to win these games is super high, then if I was Arteta, I'd probably be trying to play as close to what my best team is at in most of these games at the moment. I think also with Arteta, and it kind of goes back to that, like, you know, naive thing, but we've seen Arteta play certain players when they don't deserve to be playing for a long time. I remember like when Willian signed, and it was just like, are you going to take him off? We can all see, like, we can all see it. You know, I don't know if you guys remember as well early when Arteta came in, and the same thing that's happening to Smith Rowe was happening to Martinelli.
Yeah.
And Martinelli kind of came back from this long injury, if you remember, and he was fit for ages, and he just wasn't getting game times. And there was moments where I was just thinking, I don't know if Arteta fancies him. I don't know if he wants to play Martinelli. And I think he was playing Smith Rowe at the time, or he was playing somebody else, but Martinelli wasn't really getting game time. So we've seen this trend with Arteta just kind of overplaying players until something happens, until they either completely use. Well, we're kind of seeing a similar thing with Kai Havertz, even though he just took him out. But, you know, there's a lot of people that probably would have taken Kai Havertz out ages ago. You know, so it is a little bit of a trend that he kind of plays these players up. I think he probably believes in playing players into form, regardless of what's going on. It's either that or it's the other extreme where he plays them into an injury. So so it's a little bit of a tough one, kind of what to do. Do you stick or twist, you know?
Sticking on the topic of individuals, we're seeing a number of standout performers at Arsenal who are arguably pushing us over the line. Players like Declan Rice, William Saliba, just to mention, you know, a couple. These two specifically have been absolutely incredible and look like future Ballon d'Or, you know, winners, dare I say it. So far, Adam, who's been your standout performer, and, you know, how far do you see them going this season?
It's a really tough one. I think Saka's got 5 goals and 5 assists already. So obviously, great start for him. Odegaard's been really good, but I think the two that you mentioned just have been on another level. Declan Rice, what a signing. He's just really lifted us. He's even lifted us past the annual Partey injury fear. So we've had Partey out for what, 6 weeks now? And he's come back, and we haven't really noticed Thomas Partey being out. That's not to say that we don't need Thomas Partey back. We definitely do. I can't wait to see him on a pitch again. And I think the two of them have got real kind of contrasting traits. It's funny, I think Rice has a lot of the skill set that people thought Thomas Partey had, with the power, the kind of running ability and so on. Thomas Partey's biggest kind of, his strongest attribute is those really light, delicate feet, his ability to pick passes, the way he takes the ball in the half turn. Only Busquets can do that. It's like Thomas Partey can take players out of the game by literally dropping his shoulder and going the other way, and makes it look so easy. I don't think anyone can kind of really relay just how difficult that is to do, even if you're doing it with players who are nowhere near like that level, it's still really difficult to do. It takes just supreme understanding of everything around you. And Thomas Partey does it so well. But so the fact that Declan Rice has been able to come in and we haven't been talking about Partey over the last month is a real testament to how quickly he's settled. And he's also come in and he's playing a slightly different role to what he did at West Ham. I actually think the City game was the closest to West Ham Declan Rice that we've seen. It was kind of like put the cape back on, wanting to do everything, those big tackles, the kind of just involved it, even down to the header off the line. It was just like full kind of action man. But some of the other games we've seen him, he's been much more disciplined. He's had to play that six role where he's had to stay very central. So yeah, he's been phenomenal. And funny with Saliba, Dexter and I picked our kind of Premier League best Arsenal 11 a couple of weeks ago, and I put Saliba in mine. So we had a long discussion around this. That's how good I think William Saliba is. And someone on Twitter a couple of weeks ago accused me of giving Saliba too much credit. It was another Arsenal fan and said he wasn't that good. I was like, so I just think Saliba is one of those players. Every time I watch him, he does something else that it's like. How often do we talk about a Saliba touch on this podcast? It's things that he does that are just so effortless, so graceful, and then at the same time he can body Haaland. So he's got all that grace, but just
Yeah.
so much physical power. He's kind of everything you want in a centre back. So I think Rice and Saliba, especially Saliba, I just can't speak highly enough of him right now. So yeah, I'm curious to know what you guys think on this.
Well, last season, at the back end of last season, arguably we ended up losing, or we fell off because of the Saliba injuries. Had he been fit, who knows, right? But yeah, Dex, the same question to you, really. Who do you feel like has been
Yeah.
performing so far?
I mean, you just have to smile when you're talking about these two players because they're just they're incredible. I mean, like you just talk about us losing Saliba at the end of the season, but then if you remember like that performance, the game at West Ham and how well Rice played against us, you was thinking we need a player like that in our team, and then we went and got that guy. Um, and I think, dare I say, Rice is so good and he's having such a good season. But the position that he's playing, he's almost making Saliba look even better than he is because Rice is doing, he's screening Saliba so well that it's making Saliba's job even easier. So it's making him look even better. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So I think both of them are just having an amazing season. I mean, like honestly, when you pay over £100 million and you smash your club transfer record, that's what you're hoping to get. And to be honest, we don't see a lot of players that kind of go over that 80, 90, £100 million mark that actually come in and have the impact that Rice has had. Obviously, we're seeing it with another player who plays for Real Madrid, in Jude Bellingham, who's just, clearly doing his thing over there. But we rarely see it. I don't know if we've seen it in the Premier League, a player coming for a big, big price that maybe since Van Dijk that's kind of hit the ground running. So I think that's big testament to Rice, his ability, his mentality. I think it's clear and obvious to see that the effect that he's having on the team, on the pitch. He seems like a great guy to have in the dressing room as well. Again, this is another thing that Arteta doesn't get enough credit for, convincing players to come to Arsenal. Not enough people have really spoken about that. His ability to convince these players that Arsenal is the best place to be. And not only is it the best place to be in the case of Rice, but it's a place where you can stay. We've managed to secure so much contracts in the last year. Like signing Saliba down to a new deal is as important as signing Declan Rice. And I don't think that Arteta has had enough credit for. We've got these guys to sign new deals. These guys are. I think if you had spoken to me about players that are this good at Arsenal within the last 10 years, I'd be like, yeah, they're good, but they're gonna go. Like their final destination is somewhere else. And we're actually signing these players down: Saka, Odegaard, Martinelli, Saliba. We're signing these players down to long-term deals, and Arteta is convincing these players that Arsenal is where you should end up, not Real Madrid, not Barcelona. You should be staying at Arsenal in the peak of your career, which he's not getting enough credit for. But I mean, I think, yeah, Declan Rice for me, every game he's not dropping lower than a 7. I mean, and if he's had a 7, he's probably had a bad game. Like honestly, this guy he's incredible. He reads the game well. And I think, yes, for the stat padders out there, the goals and assists will come, but he's still young, and he's still learning his game, and he's still learning what it's like playing at a club like Arsenal with the pressure of winning every week. He didn't necessarily have that at West Ham. So there's still a lot of things that he's learning. It seems like either do you know another thing as well, which doesn't get spoken about enough, but it almost seems like we've got so much captains on our pitch. And when's the last time that we could say that as Arsenal fans? Declan Rice could take that armband. Odegaard could take it. Gabriel could take it. Zinchenko could take it. Jesus could take it. We're really developing a team of serious kind of mentality monsters, like players that really want to win, leaders all over the pitch, and I think, again, like not enough people kind of credit the behind the scenes work of what Arteta is building. A lot of people just look at what's happening on the pitch, but we've got to look at how these players are developing. And the scariest thing about Saliba and Rice is that they can only get better. Like,
Yeah.
that, do you know how mind-blowing that is, to know that we've got a player like Saliba, who is arguably the best defender in the league right now? And how old is he? Is he 22?
22, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a joke, like Declan Rice, again, he's still young. He's not 28. He's not in his 30s yet. These players can only get better, so we've got them, and we've got them just as they're about to enter their peak. And we've got them tied down to long deals. So long may it continue.
Yeah. I think
I
go on,
just wanted to ask you something on Dexter's point about Declan Rice with goals and assists. So it's a question for both of you. So in the summer, when we were spending the money we did on Declan Rice, people kept mentioning the goals and assists and so on. And as you were talking, I just had a look at Vieira's goals and assists. Vieira, his best Premier League goal scoring season for Arsenal was 6 goals, 7 in all competitions. And so he was never a player that got a lot of goals, nor did people say, Patrick Vieira, he doesn't get enough goals. And he was arguably the best midfielder in the world. Real Madrid chased him for years. He went to a great Juve side. But why is it with Declan Rice that we're hearing £100 million, you need goals and assists? Because actually, we've seen the difference that Rice has already made this season. Is it not enough for us that if he does all those things really well and he has those players in front of him, it's kind of, this is my job, I will own this area of the pitch? And then
Can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
Sorry, because I think it a lot of it is he's so good, but he's such a dynamic player that it's hard to tell whether he is a 6 or an 8. And I think a lot of people kind of see this potential of an 8. They see this kind of like Gerrard thing in him. And I think that's where the perception of the goals and assists kind of come from. If he was a player that just sat in that 6 position and played, how your classic kind of DM plays.
Like a Kante.
I don't think that the cry for the exactly like a Kante, nobody was looking at Kante for goals and assists, but whereas you look at like your Gerrards and, again, like what Jude Bellingham is doing now, and, other players of that ilk that kind of have that dynamism, and, he's got those bursts in him where he can just charge through the center of the midfield. He's so powerful. You do think he has got a goal in him. And I think because of that, that's where the expectation is coming from to, maybe he can be this kind of player that maybe, and this is why, as Arsenal fans, we're so excited to see this midfield of him and Partey with Odegaard, because when we see that trio, I expect Partey to sit and Rice to be the player that goes forward and back. So I think he's kind of got that thing in his game where you can see the goals. And it's weird because he started as a centre back, but we can see, the kind of goals in his game. I think that's where it comes from for me anyway.
Yeah, just before Adam asked that question, I was going to say exactly what you said, Dexter, which was, he's had to play both of those roles. We were all expecting to see him play alongside Thomas Partey and for him to maybe play a different role. Like I very much see him as a 8/6, or more of an advanced 6. At West Ham, when he picked up the ball, he would often race forward past the center line and then move it forward. At Arsenal, he's got so many quality players around him. He doesn't need to be the creative spark. He can be in and around the creativity. So I very much expect to see him be deployed out on the left when Partey comes back. And then Partey's position on the right-hand side as a 6 needs to remain, because he's so influential in that area of the pitch. He does so well linking up with Saka and Odegaard that he should maintain that position. I'm itching to see Rice play on the opposite flank, on the opposite side, and to start building those relationships with players like Martinelli, Jesus. What happens with Havertz? And we're going to go into talking about the flip side of this, which is players who haven't maybe lived up to their expectations. But certainly for someone like Declan Rice, we don't need to see goals and assists from him, because what he's got in his locker room right now is enough to justify the 100 mil. I don't think compared to players like Pepe or Havertz, we haven't mentioned the price tag half as many times as we have with those guys. It doesn't matter how much you pay for someone like Declan Rice, because he brings with him enough, and as you said, he's so young, he's got so much to learn. The next phase in his development is going to be those goals and those assists, is going to make him that all-round midfielder. When you were mentioning Jude Bellingham and players like that who have, maybe they're a step ahead in that developmental journey, he's not far off. Rice is not far off at all. And under Arteta, especially under Arteta, we're going to see someone flourish into an all-round complete player. And again, the sky's the limit with someone like him. So yeah, just moving on to the flip side of this topic. We spoke about stand-up players. Now, for those who have not impressed as much, or players who need to prove themselves a little bit more, Adam, there are a few candidates. What names can you sort of pick out from the top of your head?
Eddie Nketiah for me. He's a player I flip-flop on a lot. I really like Nketiah. I really want him to do well. He's a Hill-end kid. He works his socks off. I just find Eddie in a lot of games is half a step behind. And that feeds into people say he needs to be more clinical and so on. Eddie's not even hitting the shots. I need to see him hitting 3 or 4 shots a game, getting in trouble in the keeper. We know whenever he gets through, he's a clinical finisher. But right now, I'm not seeing him getting into the positions to really get those chances for himself. But it's a funny one, because I think a lot of his game has developed a lot. I just want to see more from him in the final third, more intensity, more kind of directness. And it's kind of that. I talk about strong running and so on. He runs a lot, but I want to see when he has the ball really being direct and running with real intent, getting into those positions, shooting with conviction and so on. And ultimately, I think the talent's there to be a very good player. I still don't know whether he's good enough to be the second choice at Arsenal. I think that's a position that we can very much upgrade on. I would prefer to upgrade on Jesus and have him fighting to be number one rather than just upgrade on Nketiah. And this is where I kind of have my doubts about Ivan Toney. I don't know if he's genuinely an upgrade on Gabriel Jesus because he's a better finisher, but it's a sort of trade-off with these kind of players. But so Nketiah is definitely a concern. And the other one, I think I've discussed it with both of you before, and you both know I like the player is Kai Havertz. So my
Oh
my
no, you
concern
didn't
about
mention
Havertz
Havertz, did you, Adam?
is one of those.
Wasn't expecting that.
As you know, I really like Havertz. I think he does a lot of very good work. But my concern is the whole positional thing. And it's great having someone that's kind of multifunctional, can play up front. And we saw the effectiveness of that against City in the Community Shield and the last game. But there is that kind of, it's not so much Havertz, it's the effect on the team as a whole. So if he's a midfielder and he's down as a midfielder, that means not buying a midfielder because you've got Havertz in that position. And this is a guy on big, big money that costs a lot of money. So it's Smith Rowe and Vieira are competing with him and so on. And it's like if Arteta's intent on making him an eight, that means, as Dexter says, playing him and getting him used to that role. If he's a striker, that means not buying a striker because we've then got Jesus, Havertz, and Kedia, and we'd have one more. So it's kind of where is he going to play in that sense, or is he purely going to be one of those kind of multi-use players that you buy someone in one of those roles and Havertz just becomes kind of your luxury man? That's what I'm yet to work out with. And I think Arteta said at the start when he bought him, he could offer a lot in midfield. I don't think Arteta fully knows how he wants to use Havertz yet, and I think that's why he's saying he's asking him to do two roles. He's asking him to do the aerial side of when he's playing midfield and go in and win those balls high up the park. But then he's also asking him to do the defensive work, and perhaps he's being stretched like kind of from one end of the pitch to the next with the expectations that that's also affecting his play on the ball. But look, for me, Havertz isn't a midfielder. He doesn't take the ball like a midfielder. If you play in midfield, you receive the ball on the turn every time. If you play as a central striker, you plant your feet, you basically protect yourself to hold off defenders to bring other people into the game. You take a ball in the half turn as a nine times out of 10, you lose that ball. So Gabriel Jesus is kind of the exception of that rule because he can squirm out of anything. Alexis Sanchez could do it. But as a striker, you hold up the ball. And we saw it against City, how good he is at holding up the ball and literally making himself big, using those big limbs that he's got and knocking it off. But so that's my concern about Havertz. It's not so much that he's a bad player or that he's not living. I don't think he is fully living up to expectations, but at the same time, I think that working out how we're going to use him, that's my concern because when a player's confidence is low and you're changing their role every week, that's going to make the confidence arguably even worse.
Same question for you, really, Dexter. There's who's on your hit list?
I mean, Adam covered the two obvious ones in Eddie and Kai Havertz. Personally, for me, I kind of approach this question a little bit differently. Just it's who do I really need to perform rather than who's just not playing well. And I mean, Adam mentioned Jesus, and for me, I mean, I know what I'm getting with Eddie. So as frustrating as it can be, I can see his limitations. I can see, you know, players like that. You can kind of see what the ceiling is. So my expectations of Eddie aren't as high as everybody else's. You know, he is our number two striker. He comes in, you know, he's not as good as Jesus. So therefore, yes, it is frustrating him not getting into games, but what do I expect? I don't expect him to get on the ball, dribble past 2 or 3 players, and smash it in the top bins. I do kind of expect Jesus to do stuff like that because he's that good. And when he doesn't do it, it's really frustrating. When I watch games like Spurs and I see him having those chances that we have to score to make us comfortable in the game, it's moments like that with Jesus that really frustrate me. So obviously, yes, that the kind of Nketiah thing and the Havertz thing, I'll go on to that. But I'm really keeping a close eye on Jesus this year because my expectations of him are so high. And I think, Adam mentioned it, with kind of bringing in players like Tony. I don't know if Tony is necessarily an upgrade on Jesus. I don't think he's better than Jesus. But what I need to see from Jesus' improvement is just being a bit more clinical. I need to see that because that can be frustrating. I mean, like I don't expect Eddie to score a lot of chances, but Jesus is our main guy. So it is more frustrating when I'm watching him in these games, and our main guy is not finishing his dinner. Then you can't really expect Eddie to come in and do better than our main guy, if you know what I'm trying to say. So I'm keeping a very close eye on him. I'm also keeping a very close eye on Raya as well. Um, you know, just simply because I think Ramsdale's been so good, and um, I'm not 100% sold on David Raya yet. I'm not 100% sold on what his ceiling is. And I think like for reasons that I mentioned earlier, like just things like the dressing room, but also just on pure ability, I don't think that it's night and day between them. It's not like Jesus and Nketiah where it's like obviously this one is way better. So Arteta obviously sees something, the coaching staff obviously sees something. I'm happy to kind of go along with that. We've seen, players who we don't expect a lot from come into this team and do really, really well. So we kind of have to trust Arteta on this one. But I am going to be keeping a very, very close eye on him. We've seen him make a couple mistakes, and I don't necessarily think it's fair. Maybe because I like Ramsdale and I respect I respect the rise of Ramsdale, where he's come from, and the fact that he's got us this far. Um, but I also think if Ramsdale had made the mistakes that Raya has made, loads of people would be kind of getting onto him, and maybe not everybody's saying that because it's David Raya, and people are almost acting as if Ramsdale isn't as good as he has been for the last couple seasons. So I'm not saying that he is a bad player. I'm not saying that Jesus is a bad player. I'm just saying my expectations of them two in particular this season are really high for a team that's looking to go and win the Premier League. And what I will say is, especially on the Jesus thing, is if Arteta can be that ruthless with Ramsdale, then I kind of expect the same energy with Jesus. I'm expecting, like Adam said, the upgrade needs to be on Jesus, you know, and turn Jesus maybe into the number 2 striker. I don't know if that upgrade is Tony. Maybe there's another player. Maybe it's Ferguson. Maybe it's Osimhen. I don't know. But I expect that same level of ruthlessness because there's a lot of games where I think Jesus does amazingly well in and his hold up play and his hassling of the ball. But the things that I want my striker to do, which is score goals, in the same way that I want my keeper to save shots. Like, yes, I'm happy that he's good with the ball at his feet, but I just want him to save shots. I want my strikers to score goals, and I just would like to see Jesus kind of up those numbers in terms of goals. So they're my two.
Very interesting, very contrasting
Yeah.
to sort of groups of players. So the obvious choices were Nketiah and Havertz, but then you're right to say, you know, Jesus has gone under the radar. The main role of a striker is to score goals. But what I will say, and Adam mentions it quite a lot, and rightfully so, is that we haven't seen Jesus play through the middle as often as we would like. You know, with either Martinelli missing on the left hand side and then Saka going missing now. You know, we're hoping to see those three play together so that we can see the interchanging front three and we can see the full effect of that sort of attacking front line. But just before we end the show, I do want to just quickly touch on the Chelsea game. I know we've spoken about it earlier on, but just a quick, you know, preview, I guess, a look into the next game. Away at Stamford Bridge, Adam, 3 points are a must. Unfortunately, you know, depends on how you want to look at it. The international break came at such a time where Arsenal had just beaten City. Now we're going to have to sort of take off from where we left off, which is easier said than done after a lengthy break. Yeah, what are you expecting going into that game?
I'm hoping more that everyone comes back fit and that we're kind of raring to go from that game. But last time after the international break, we had just beaten United. We had this huge high. It was 2 late goals, and we came back and beat Everton away on a ground that we hadn't won on in 6 years. So I think the team's good enough. And one of the things I was thinking today about the international break is, do you remember a few years ago when we were like, oh, it's great, we've only got 4 players away on international duty. That's a couple of weeks Arteta has on the training ground to sort things out. Now we've got like 15 players away, and we've got that confidence that Arteta doesn't need 2 weeks on the training ground to sort things out. I think this group of players are good enough to come back and be rearing to go straight away. It's more the thing that we're all scared of is making sure no one comes back injured. But look, I'm confident going into the Chelsea game. I think we've got the players. And when you look at their results, yes, they've won 2. They've won 2 games against 2 very, very poor sides. And our record, especially Arteta's record at Stamford Bridge, is incredible. So I'm going into that game really confident and hoping that we have our front 3 back. We've got Odegaard, we've got Partey and Rice on the pitch, and like we just blow them away because the teams are night and day. And I didn't think I'd be saying that about Arsenal and Chelsea. Like even kind of 18 months ago, there wasn't this difference between Arsenal and Chelsea, and they've just been run so spectacularly badly that we've really pulled away. And I think we're going to go and completely blitz them at Stamford Bridge. That's just what my gut's saying right now. And I really hope I'm right, but I'm confident going into that game.
What about you, Dexter? How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned at the start of the show kind of Arsenal's kind of just chilled, relaxed start to the season. And I did mention kind of it's not all about performance and it's just about getting the 3 points. And I stand by that. However, this game against Chelsea, I would like to see the performance, especially off the back of beating Man City. I just think if we beat Man City in the way that we beat them and then go and blitz Chelsea, it just sends out that message that we are very serious and we're here to stay. And I think that we need to be what I've been jealous of over the last few years, over the loads of years, is the big teams taking advantage of vulnerable teams in those moments. We've seen it happen to us so much times. Like to the point where it's annoying, just when we're a wounded animal, teams just come and just finish us, and yes, Chelsea have had the last couple results have been good, but generally they've been terrible. The last year they've been terrible. And if Arsenal as title challengers can't come to Stamford Bridge, where we have had a lot of success in recent years, and really put in a performance, I'd be pretty disappointed. So I do think that yes, this game is about 3 points. Every game is about 3 points, but this one is a bit more personal. I do think. Look, Chelsea have got a very they've got a very young team. They've got a decent manager, and I think you'd be a blind person if you couldn't see the potential that they've got. with that manager and that team. And I think for now, it's best to stamp our marker down now, because I do think they are going to come good. At some point, it's inevitable. They are going to come good in the same way, quite similar to how, I see Newcastle. At some point, these teams they're going to get good. So I think it's important that we kind of little brother them now, because it's just going to be harder later on in the season and later on down the years to kind of do that. And you do want to kind of get that psychological edge. Look how long it's taken us to beat Man City. And we used to slap Man City every single year. And then after a while, they beat us once and then we just couldn't do it. So I think, from a psychological aspect on another big team, in the same way that we kind of have that thing over Tottenham when they come to the Emirates, psychologically, there's so much history behind them losing at the Emirates or not winning at the Emirates. And it seems like we're starting to get that thing with Stamford Bridge. They were like, for years, we couldn't go to Stamford Bridge and win.
Yeah.
Nobody could go to Stamford Bridge and win, and now it seems like it's a place that we're getting a lot of joy. So I think, I do expect a performance. I expect 3 points, and on to the next.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to this one, because not only is this an opportunity for Arsenal to make a statement after beating City, but also it's a really, really hard run of games, the start of a really long, hard run of games for Chelsea. They've got us, Brentford, Tottenham, City, Newcastle, Brighton, United, all in one go. So best of luck to them. But yeah, Arsenal are very much in the driver's seat for that one. Hoping to see a good few goals scored, and hopefully our favourite front three as well, with Martinelli and Jesus and Saka as well. But yeah, good stuff. I guess it's time for us to say goodbye. Unfortunately, I do want to say a massive thank you to everyone who's listened up until this point. Thank you very, very much. If you did enjoy this episode, please do leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Let us know what you thought of the show by reaching out to us on Twitter. You can find us over there at Arsenal Therapy. You can find Adam over there at AdamKeys_, and you can find our esteemed guest, Dexter, over there at D Hercs. Did I get that right? That is
right. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good stuff. And also, if you want to follow me, you can find me over there at Gunner Since 96. As always, we'll be back next week to give you your usual weekly dose of Arsenal therapy. But if you can't wait until then, make sure to head over to the Arsenal Therapy YouTube channel for the 15-minute show, and also the preview show, where we'll be taking a look at this Chelsea fixture in a lot more detail. Make sure to also head over to the Arsenal Therapy website for the blog posts, where we'll be breaking down all of our thoughts and feelings on that game and much, much more. Once again, thanks a lot for tuning in, and thank you as well, Dexter, for taking the time out to join us.
Thank you, guys. Loved it.
Hopefully we can bring you back in for another chat as well. Have yourselves a lovely week, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.